This is indeed a terrorist attack aimed at destroying a critically important object of civilian infrastructure. And the attack has been carried out and ordered by the security service of Ukraine. Yes, and the citizens of Russia and other states have helped in the preparation of this terrorist attack. Thank you.
Назначен для завоевания господства в воздухе, огнем по отдельным целям, подвижным и неподвижным.
Я тебя поздравляю с окончанием учения, желаю успеха.
Подполковник Хасан Зуда.
A massed Ukrainian military formation, almost 300 troops, backed by dozens of tanks and armored vehicles, launches a surprise attack on a Russian-held village in Kherson region. But the defenders were waiting. Rockets, missiles, shells rain down on the Ukrainian offensive. Bodies pile the fields, quickly stalls and turns into a rout.
They ran, those who could get away. They left behind their dead and wounded. They also abandoned their vehicles, armored personnel carriers, fire support vehicles, and a tank. All of this in just one battle.
Their morale is broken, and the prisoners confirm this. They say they don't want to fight. Yesterday he was a plumber. Today he's given a gun and told to fight. They don't want to fight. They don't know how to.
Due to security concerns, we have been asked not to name the settlement where this battle took place. It is still too dangerous to visit, but abandoned Ukrainian armor is already being hauled away. There's a trophy vehicle, a Ukrainian BTR-3U, abandoned several days ago by Ukrainian soldiers who were driven to attack Russian positions, failed, and left behind all their belongings, vast amounts of ammunition, clothes, gear, weapons. But inside it is entirely intact. The thermal sights, night vision, everything's in working order. The vehicle can go under its own power. As for ammunition, well, they barely expended any. So quick was their retreat. In this one battle, which lasted just hours, Ukraine lost 17 tanks and armored vehicles. 120 Ukrainian soldiers and mercenaries were killed and left behind. Among them, Polish citizens. Their identification documents were found amongst the corpses. Behind me, a BMP-2 vehicle, also a trophy vehicle, captured from Ukrainian troops as they retreated after another unsuccessful attack. Kherson province is rapidly turning into a graveyard for Ukrainian soldiers who were drafted and are now being driven to attack enforced, well-defended Russian positions, and they are being driven to attack. Most of the soldiers that have been captured here, that have surrendered and are now prisoners, say that they were civilians off to work in Lvov or in Kiev, where they were drafted and given a simple choice. Either their property and possessions are confiscated or they choose to serve. In a matter of days, they are thrown at well-defended Russian positions. Morale is, well, there isn't much to speak of. The captured soldiers all say the same thing, that if they refuse orders to go to attack or if they attempt to surrender or retreat, that they are shot by nationalists who are always in the rear, always watching them to make sure that they don't surrender. Despite these heavy losses, repeated along the Kherson front for 3 weeks, Kiev remains undeterred, throwing more men and material into the meat grinder in a desperate bid to secure a meaningful victory on this front. how many Ukrainian soldiers die for Kiev's victory here is seemingly irrelevant. Morad Gazdiev, RT, from Kherson region.
There has just been an outbreak of cholera inside Syria, prompting the World Health Organization to get involved, sending over medical aid to stop the spread.
Infections have been recorded in 6 of Syria's 14 governorates.
Although the Western media has covered to some extent the outbreak of cholera in Syria, there has been little to no context attached to what is actually going on inside that country. In fact, there is no mention, let alone investigation, into the crippling economic sanctions applied by the United States and the European Union against the state of Syria, affecting greatly the civilian population there.
The United States imposed its toughest sanctions ever on Syria, aiming to choke off revenue for Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's government in an effort to force the country back to UN-led negotiations and broker a deal to end the country's nearly decade-long war.
Whilst NATO countries pretend to be against things like occupation, for instance, which they support openly with Israel's occupation of Palestinian land, and of course the acquisition of territory by force, which the United States has done in Syria, amounting to an illegal occupation of over a third of Syrian territory.
The Biden administration is committed to retaining U.S. military presence in northeast Syria.
On the ground, every few weeks, U.S. soldiers ferry equipment and supplies from Iraq to northeast Syria.
Not only that, but the United States government, through its proxy forces in northeastern Syria, the Al-Tanf province, and also thousands of its own forces, which have been primarily based around the oil-rich areas known as the Al-Ammar oil fields in northeastern Syria to protect the oil.
We're keeping the oil. We have the oil. The oil is secure. We left troops behind only for the oil.
And at this time, the United States controls over 90% of Syria's oil and gas resources, in addition to its most fertile agricultural lands. And it gets worse. The United States has even been found in several reports to have looted wheat and barley from Syria and taken it over the border into Iraq. The United States has even been accused of sending poisoned seeds to Syrian farmers in northeastern Syria, which has not only destroyed the crops, but potentially could have poisoned innocent Syrians in the process. And when it comes to the economic sanctions, it is always the civilians who pay the price. And we have seen this in every single country that the United States applies sanctions against. Take, for example, the case of Iraq, where the United States applied sanctions which ended up killing 800,000 children.
We have heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that's more children than died in Hiroshima. And you know, is the price worth it?
I think this is a very hard choice, but we think the price is worth it. It is a moral question.
That's just the child death toll alone, let alone its sanctions against places like Iran, Venezuela, Cuba, and the list goes on. Meanwhile, as this is all going on, the economic pressure, the theft of land, resources, the looting of those resources in cases that have been reported. Also, we have the fact that the Israelis, who are the best friend of the United States, are consistently bombarding Damascus. And the strikes are not just limited to areas such as the Damascus International Airport or the Aleppo International Airport, but multiple times just this year, Israel launched airstrikes against the strategic and vital port of Latakia inside Syria, which destroyed goods which were meant to be on their way to Syrian markets and to help the Syrian people.
The port of Latakia is in the west of the country and handles most of Syria's imports.
In fact, at this time, due to the economic sanctions and the occupation of Syrian lands, the average Syrian is poorer today than they were during the war. So it should come as no surprise that cholera is breaking out amongst the Syrian population.
For the hundreds of thousands of displaced Syrians living in camps, a fresh outbreak of cholera threatens further misery in the months ahead.
As happened in the case of Yemen years ago, which cost tens of thousands of lives. And it wasn't that cholera just decided to appear in Yemen. There was a brutal Saudi-led blockade on the country, which starved the population and resulted in economic turmoil in the country. But despite all the facts you've heard in this video here, the most unfortunate thing is that there is no organized campaigns throughout any Western country to stop these economic sanctions against Syria and the illegal occupation of Syrian lands. And that comes down to the mainstream Western corporate media not even reporting this. Most Americans have no idea, neither do most Europeans have any idea, that the United States currently occupies a third of Syrian territory.
Выстрел!